leveraging Web3 for fan engagement in sports.
Fantastic. So we've got a real wealth of experience on the panel today. They cover everything from Formula One, cricket, sailing, football, tennis, and I'm sure there's a number of other sports in between that as well. So what I really want to do is try and get some kind of first-hand experience from these experts in terms of what's happening in sport and what's happening with fan engagement. Mark gave us a bit of an insight from a rights holder's perspective. These guys all work with rights holders on the other side, and I think I'll open up the kind of question with something quite broad, which is, what's your perspective and what are you seeing from your clients in terms of the issue or the issues that sports currently facing, and how Web3 and other technologies are able or potentially able to address some of those issues, as well as open up new opportunities, because there's a lot of experimentation taking place in the sports tech area. Anybody want to take that first?
It's a very beautiful question, Stephen, that you started with. I've been hearing a lot from my clients and customers that they have been stuck within a very limited revenue stream when it comes to sports. And traditionally, we've seen these sports franchisees and clubs limited to making money out of ticketing or sponsorships and like a very limited stream. And with Web3 coming into picture, I see the stream diversifying. I see new channels coming up. I see new monetization streams coming up and capitalizing on the fan base. So that's really where I see an opportunity out there for the sports industry and fan engagement coming together.
Okay, so interesting. So from your perspective, it's an additional revenue stream alongside the traditional revenue streams of kind of sponsorship, broadcast, ticketing, merchandise. And that's exciting you and PwC as well as your clients. Jose, do you want to give us your perspective?
Just to kind of give the context to that, you have a generational change. Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they consume culture, sports, entertainment, gaming in a different way than previous generations. So what that means is that now you have more kids that spend time playing FIFA than watching live sports. And that's how it is right now. The problem is that the business models of sports teams and leagues is predicated on how much attention you're getting, because that's your marketing dollar. The way that they make their money is broadcasting rights, licensing, and sponsorships. So when you have less people that watch your stream, your tennis game, your football game, this value goes down. So you can see the Premier League, their value of their sponsorship is 26% down. Same thing is happening with the Serie A. Same thing is happening with Ligue 1 in France. So that is the problem. And then what we're seeing is an opportunity in terms of the value chain. In sports, same as in every other industry, you have value chain from how sports is financed, produced, and distributed, all the way to how it is consumed, done, and monetized. So when we look at Web3, I think you focus on the financing side. When you look at new ownership models, fan-owned teams. When you look at distribution, you have marketplaces that allow talent, sports, leagues, and teams to launch digital products, like you said. And monetization is tied to distribution. So monetization is about removing the intermediaries that you have. For example, if you are Manchester United, you do not go straight to your consumer. If you're Manchester United, you're going through Sky Sports, and then there's the broadcast. You're going through the newspaper, let's say the news outlet, digital, then them. You're going through Instagram, different platforms, same with the retailers. So those problems in terms of middlemen, that's what blockchain is solving and allowing them to go straight direct to consumer.
Okay, yeah, very interesting. So similar to Mark in the previous chat, mentioning the lack of control and the lack of that direct relationship because it's via social media, it's via broadcasters, etc.
Yeah.
And also a change from a generational point of view in terms of how younger generations are consuming sport.
Yeah.
And that distribution being critical to all of the revenue streams, whether it's new or existing. Okay, yeah, no, that's super interesting. Tim.
So for me, to answer your question in what we have left is almost impossible in terms of the problems that Web3 and sports have at the moment. But I think everything that's been said before just now and everything on Mark said, there's such a huge amount of opportunity, and the concepts that we can come up with are unbelievable. But I think the biggest problem in Web3 and sports at the moment is the execution of it by sports clubs themselves. And I think that's a real major issue that we need to tackle from a club perspective, from a league perspective, from a brand perspective, whoever it is, because the vision of a real Web3 centric person is very different to how a sports person engages with their club. So we need to look at how do you educate, how do you bring people into this opportunity, because we all know what Web3 can do. We all know that the interoperability, how you can create a fan base globally, that we can track all of this on the blockchain, we can create anything that we want to come up with, but to then get our fans to buy into that is a really, really challenging situation. And the reason for that is because of the last bull market, we saw such a big influx of Web3 experts, third-party platforms coming into sports organizations and doing a really bad job. About 95% of those platforms, experts, are no longer in that sports space because they came in, they did a big cash grab, and then they alienated most of the sports fans of these clubs. So I think the real opportunity is for clubs to go back to basics and go, how do I speak to my fans? And we always, as an agency that advise sports clubs, we always ask them 3 questions. Why are you doing it? So what's the main reason? Why do your fans want it? And then how do you do it? And I think you need to ask those 3 questions and have very, very direct answers for them to then be able to address how you build your strategy moving forward. And I think for me, that's the number one problem why we're not seeing adoption of Web3 across the board, because fans aren't being spoken to in the right way, and then clubs are also not investing the time and the resources to create a long-term strategic strategy. You don't have a club that doesn't have a social media director and social media execs and blah, blah, blah. You need to have a Web3 director, a Web3 exec, and actually invest time into it to then start seeing the rewards and the benefits.
Yeah, okay, I think that makes sense. Not every organization has a Mark, for instance, who gets it at, both a hands-on experience, but also has enough experience strategically to be able to kind of deploy these things. But I think it's interesting because I think what you're saying is kind of twofold. It's at an organizational level, there's an enormous amount of education. And then executionally, what's been before has kind of muddied the waters. And that's a big undertaking. We'll touch on that again if we get time, actually, what is involved in a Web3 execution. Adam?
I think it was all covered. I think there's an equilibrium around, what it means in terms of consumer engagement and customer acquisition dollars versus the revenue dollars that come into a project. And it takes backing, it takes financial support, and it takes a lot of strategy. So I think, between all 3 other discussions, it's pretty covered. But yeah, my perspective is that, this Web 2.5 initiative, it needs to be targeted to a particular audience, and I think that there's always this balance between those that are crypto native that appreciate different types of technology than someone that's trying to understand the value of a digital asset from the get-go. So yeah, we've got the luxury of tech evolving in real time, and there's so many cool things that can be developed and delivered. I think people need to be more open to just testing and trialing different things without having to expect people to pay for it.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, that leads into another question I had, which is, I think we've seen the market kind of evolve from, sponsorships, the Binances, lots in Formula One, even, FTX in its day, the rise of some of the big kind of platforms like Socios and Sorare and Dapper. And I think now increasingly into kind of bespoke activations by teams and by leagues. And I think what we've also been seeing, but I'll be fascinated to hear from the panel, this rise of this term 2.5, Web 2.5. So, and the rationale behind that to engage with a mass market audience, whereas, initially it might have been much more Web 3. But I guess my question is, what good examples are there of Web 2.5 activations? And on the flip side of that, does that in some instances kind of detract from Web 3? Because actually you could probably do this on the internet with a server. Or is it just a process that we're going through in terms of education?
I'll answer that quickly. I think a great example is McLaren from a Web 2.5. So McLaren did a free-to-mint NFT drop where you went onto the collectibles.mclaren platform, just put your email address in, and then you're able to get a free NFT before the race weekend of every single race. And it was a campaign called 23 of 23. And then the more you collected, the more rewards you get. And then ultimately that culminated in people being flown over to Abu Dhabi, being able to meet Zach Brown, discounts on tickets. And that was done with no mention of the word NFT, no mention of the word blockchain. So I think that is a great example of it. But to answer your question around, well, shouldn't you just do it on the internet? It's then again, how do you position this? Because before we had Web3, we weren't saying, go onto our website because our storage was on an AWS server or whatever it may be when you're buying a football shirt. No one ultimately cares about the technology behind as a user. So I think, again, you just need to position it of go, this is the rewards that you can get. And then also it is in your wallet. And then if you go to a game, or if you go to this, or you go to that, you spend money, that interoperability of other platforms, transactions, just becomes the norm and is second nature. The same way we put something in our basket in Amazon, you don't question how does it get there and what's it stored on. So it does go back to that brand positioning or how you start creating a better user flow and a user journey. The technology behind it is obviously driving it, but we shouldn't be leading with that message.
No, agreed. And so the kind of verbiage around it is important, but obviously the user experience is also absolutely critical, right? Because as we all know, within crypto, it's a minefield. Anyone else got any kind of opinions on 2.5 versus 2 versus 3?
I particularly feel that this 2.5 journey is like a bridge towards the Web 3, right? It's helping customers, helping brands to go towards Web 3 who are not able to like transform immediately. So it's kind of bridging that gap and helping them go to that Web 3 horizon, because it is different for everybody. For somebody, a Web 3 implementation is a here and now play, but for somebody else, it's maybe a 5-year down the horizon where they want to fully get into it and scale the adoption. So I personally feel that it's acting as a bridge.
Yeah, it's a step.
Yeah, it's a step and a process towards Web 3.
And I think when you look at some of the numbers like Tim was mentioning on Formula One, I mean, that ran into several million, I think, in terms of tokens being...
Yeah, we had 3 million claims and then 1 million unique people across the 23 drops.
Yeah, which is impressive. And then I guess it's moving that on into, more Web3 use cases, whether that's token gating, whether that's, I don't know, gaming or whatever it might be through those assets. If we go to the opposite end of the spectrum and we talk about DAOs, Jose, I'm looking at you because I know your organization has worked with SailGP.
Yeah. So
talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my business partner Nathan, he was heading M&A at Endeavor. They bought SailGP at a $250 million valuation, grew the number of races, grew the number of teams. And there was a new team that was enabled by Near, who's our anchor investor, so that the shares, you put the ownership of the team into an SPV, you divide the shares of the SPV into tokens, and then you open those tokens to the public. So fans can buy a share, a stake, on the teams. That's the normal value proposition. In terms of SailGP specifically, it's very governance-centric. It is not like the other models of fan ownership where you can actually earn revenue based on that. Okay. But the players they have a deeper connection with their team because they are part of the decision-making. So depending on the tokens that they have, the DAO tokens, they can push a proposal, vote on it, and then whatever the majority decides happens in terms of the operations of the team.
So there's different levels of influence, shall we say, depending on the
Correct.
level you buy in at.
Yeah, so CLGP, has more of a governance approach, but then when you see to fan-owned teams, there's this portfolio company we have, it's called One Future Sports, and without going outside topic with AI, they are a virtual league, so everything is AI generated, the players don't exist, the league is simulated, but fans, as they can own stakes into these teams and then earn a revenue share. So I think there's those two models between governance and then the financial appeal.
So kind of financializing sport.
Yeah.
Which again we'll touch on the next panel, but also then the governance piece. And this has kind of worked both ways, right? There's been a few disasters, Crawley,
There's been
City,
many.
FC springs to mind, and outside of sports. But you're obviously bullish on this becoming a model, which obviously is going to engage fans if it works.
I think it's early right now because what we're seeing is you're seeing this in niche sports, which is a good thing to kind of start the flywheel of traction. If we think crazy things into the future and you can own a share of a stadium of one of the major teams, then that becomes a lot more, it just comes to life a lot more, the concept. But probably far from that still.
Okay, interesting. So I think from kind of 2.5, baby steps all the way through to owning a part of the team and having influence and there being some sort of sport-fi component. There's a big spectrum there. Adam, talk to us about the Australian Open. I know you've been working with them for 3 years, I think now.
Well, that's where we first met.
Well, it is.
I think it was a really interesting, initial creative brief, which was basically nothing. So we wanted to look at it and explore it in a way that we could set a new benchmark in how digital assets and like-minded fans could connect, and we connected real-time data to tiles on the tennis court, and we played within the limitations. So the brief basically came with one limitation, which was player rights. So we weren't able to use any player name, but we were able to use the assets around it. So I think for us, we went very Web3, and I'm a romantic when it comes to how to build on Web3, and that worked in our favour. That was from the choice of blockchain, which I give credit to Tennis Australia for being able to back Ethereum at a time where the merge still hadn't happened at that point, and there was a lot of topics around the carbon offsetting initiatives, which I think at the end of the day were just a conversation, but it was a reality at the time. But yeah, for us, I think what we saw was a Web3 community of like-minded audiences, meaning that they've played in crypto, they've bought a lot of different NFTs, they understand ownership, and they also respect technology and advances, and being able to create something that created a new benchmark in terms of how people could connect to the game through a tournament was really impressive, across the board. And, I think it's been able to show other rights holders what is possible. We've seen a number of different evolutions of it since. But for us, it's a matter of working out how to continue to connect and evolve. And there's plenty of ideas to put to the table. I think you just need time. And, I like that blend of being able to get to a wider, larger audience and rewarding them in different ways.
Yeah, and the Australian Open have gone on to do lots of other stuff, haven't they?
Totally.
With roadblocks and sponsors, etc. Quick question just to focus in on the region. It's obviously a hotbed for sports and, new sports initiatives, acquisitions, etc. It's also a hotbed, obviously, for technology. What are the opportunities? What are the immediate opportunities, do you think, for the combination of both of those, whether that's the Abu Dhabi Formula One, whether that's the Saudi Pro League, or the Six Kings tennis tournament due to run at the end of this year? Tim, have you got a view?
Yeah, I mean, the opportunity here is incredible, especially from a technology point of view, to be able to embed that into sports, obviously with the likes of Saudi and Vision 2030, which is very much focusing on sports as one of the key pillars. I think that the region is positioned to really drive the growth of Web3 and cryptocurrency within the sports sector, because they're not scared to take a chance, they're not scared to try new things, and we work with a number of sports entities in Saudi Arabia, and they're not scared to fail, they're scared to kind of miss out on that opportunity, and they also take it with a great view of going, you know what, we need to embed this because they're trying to compete with the likes of European football. So I think the technology and the products we're going to see coming out of the region is going to be probably the best anywhere in the world.
Cool. And just quickly to wrap up, if we all got into a time machine and we're 5 years ahead of ourselves now, what kind of one use case do you think is going to stand out from a sports perspective when it comes to Web3?
I mean, it would be that you have your digital ID card from the club that is connected to everything that you do to spend. When you do a transaction, when you buy a drink, when you buy a burger, to the time you spend online, to everything, it's tracked, it's and then rewarded to you. They're a big kind of social-fi movement, is where I'd like to see it in 5 years' time. Cool.
Anyone else? Jose?
Yeah, I think it's the unlocking of the value of the data that they do not get access because of all the intermediaries they have. So what if, the example before of Manchester United, they don't get any of the data that's stuck in Instagram and in Sky. What if they had all of that knowledge of what their audience, what their team, their fans actually want? I think that's what's going to unlock the most value for the IP holders.
So kind of token as the new cookie.
I see it like that, not from a purely financial perspective, because I don't think that sports fans have the same loyalty problem that you have as a brand, because you can switch, but you're never going to switch football teams. So I think it's not about loyalty and financialization of that, but what can you do with knowing that data, with visibility on that data?
Okay, cool. Mokshita, quick answer.
Quickly, I think 5 years is a very, very long time in terms of talking about how technology will shape up, but definitely in terms of I see the growing digital market, which will lead the way ahead, and digital natives, digital converts across different platforms will come together. So I see a lot of opportunity across esports and Web3 as well. So
okay, yeah, interesting. So convergence of different data. Adam, a single word answer if you don't mind.
Physical tickets are dead.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much to the panel. Appreciate your time and your insight. Thank you.